Hey everybody, Jake here with TrendSpider. Hope everyone's having a good holiday weekend and enjoying Friday off from the markets if you are just solely a stock trader on the US markets. Now, what we do have on the weekend analysis is overall kind of the same thing, looking at SPY, QQQ, and XBI. And we're really seeing some interesting discrepancies once again this weekend with SPY and QQQ really starting to continue to, or not starting, but continuing to move up and nearly reaching all-time highs on QQQ. Not as much on SPY. We did miss it by about $3 or $4, but the Qs did nearly touch it. So we'll go over that shortly. Starting with SPY, we do have this interesting setup on the weekly candle where the MACD and the vortex indicator have this interesting relationship. Now, the MACD has actually not started to curl over yet, so this could be a little premature to look at this. But the thing is, notice how steep the price action to the upside has been since we really started this action right around here. So here to here, the price action has been very steep to the upside. However, we've been almost flat on the histogram, meaning the fast hasn't really started to move further away from the slow here. And so if the fast started to move towards the slow, getting closer, we'd see the histogram start to move down as well. We are already seeing that on XBI, so we'll go over that shortly. But another thing to keep in mind is the vortex indicator. Every time there's been divergence between the blue and the red, and then you've got this convergence here, it's generally been the start of a bigger move down. So we've had that here after a long period of divergence, we had that here after a long period of divergence, and now we've been diverging now for quite some time, not as long as these two periods. So that is something to keep in mind for the bullish side of things. But on the bearish side of things, we are starting to converge kind of more accelerated, if you will, and this is something to keep in mind with the indecision doji up top. If we did start to pull back, the first area I would probably watch for is this gap area below around 283, and that coincides pretty nicely with the weekly Fibonacci level that we have overlaid here. So we can easily go in and kind of create an alert at this line. So if we wanted to capture maybe the bottom of that gap as well, you can kind of see that here. If we got anywhere within this purple area, we would be alerted. So we can go create a breakthrough touch or bounce alert, and that sensitivity is pretty far to the right. So the alert will fire within $2.11 of this trend line above. So that is kind of catching the margin of error, so the price doesn't have to hit right at the 0.786 retracement level. But it is a way to capture some of that flexibility there, where the price action is really not hitting exactly at the line or at the indicator if we were using an indicator alert. Now, if we wanted to be alerted right when we got into this purple area, we would put this on the 5-minute, because if we waited for the time frame and it was on the daily, that means we would wait for the daily candle close to close in this area. If you wanted to be alerted right when it happens, you would need to use the 5-minute candle close within this area, and then you would be alerted intraday when that occurs. We can keep this, the alert name, fib level, and then we can have it expire, let's say 14 days or triggered one time, and now that alert is created, and we will be able to track the price action if we did break to the downside. Now, if we continue to move up, we can easily create an alert here as well. Maybe we don't want to make it as sensitive. Maybe we want to just capture the bottom here right at this this body of this candle right near all-time highs, and then we can do the same thing. 14 days have passed or triggered once. Same conditions here, and so now we technically don't really have to watch this chart too much, because we'll be alerted whenever there's a big breakthrough between these 2 points. Now, one thing to also keep in mind on the daily is the fact that the price action has been moving up quite substantially in the last few weeks, but the MACD is actually hitting lower highs here as we're about to possibly have a bearish cross. So, it's hard to say what's going to happen here. I would say the fact that there's a lot of gaps below is something to keep in mind. So if we did actually start to break down, we could easily put in alert here on the weekly for a possible breakdown. So next week, if these conditions become true, we'll be alerted. So we'll go in, create the multi-factor alert, SPY breakdown, and the two criteria that I would use would be the weekly indicator MACD has decreased. So that means the fast, this blue, has started to move down. So that would be my first indication of maybe momentum is starting to curl to the downside. And then also the condition would be the weekly indicator, and I'm looking for the Vortex 8 to cross here. So it'd be the Vortex 8 positive, because this is the blue, crossed the negative, the weekly Vortex negative. And so we want to define that cross. So in this case, it would be the weekly, same thing, Vortex positive, is less than the Vortex negative. So that is capturing this cross occurring here. So if these started to cross, for me, that'd be an interesting kind of level to watch breaking down. Let's say, we also wanted to be alerted about any of the following bearish candlestick formations. We could go in and do a weekly, maybe, pattern, and maybe we want to look for a bearish engulfing or a weekly bearish harami. We can also add this. So any of these, so we have all of these need to occur, and if any of these also happen, we will be alerted. The alert's created, and then we can follow it in our alert panel here. Now, I will show you guys how the alerts do fire and how one fired on XBI. So let's start moving on to QQQ and then XBI. The Qs have also been interesting. As I mentioned here, we really touched all-time highs, almost broke them, and really continued to move. However, sellers came in and continued to kind of keep this area at a this kind of wall, if you will. So same thing, not necessarily exactly the same thing, but on the MACD, what we can see here is the price action has been pretty steep moving up. However, the MACD has pretty much stayed flat. And so that's something to definitely keep in mind. Now, the MACD really over time in the last year or so hasn't really gotten above this point. And so when we have got around, let's say, 2.5 to 3 on the MACD here, we have experienced some pretty big moves down. So this one here, this one here, this one here with a big gap down, and then you've got these smaller ones, and then ultimately this big one here when we cross the zero line. Now, we have had some reversals here at this level with this little pullback before a rip, this little pullback before a higher rip. So will the third time be a charm here? We will have to see. But the weekly candle suggests that buyers are still very much in control here. But the same thing where we've got this steep price action, but then we've got this kind of flat histogram here showing that the fast is really failing to continue to pull away from the slow. Now, when we saw that in the past, notice how we had this really steep price action to the downside. The histogram pretty much stayed kind of flat as we continue to move down, almost like a divergence. And then we reversed here with the piercing pattern on the weekly, which really was a strong indication that this may be over back in late December, early January. Now, on the Vortex side of things, we've got the MACD, doing its thing with its flat histogram, but then we also have the Vortex indicator positive starting to slowly converge towards the negative, not really happening at a hard pace at this point, but it is something to watch. Notice how long this divergence can occur. This has not happened as long as this did, so there is still time that this could continue to move up, especially with this strong candle. But it is interesting to see how the volume has been decreasing the last two times these two big moves have happened. Now you got to remember, lower volume, higher price, so it's not exactly the same. So you can have decreasing volume at higher prices and still have the money flowing in. But it's the crazy thing is we've only had one red candle the whole year of 2019. So let's be honest, this can't happen forever. So we'll just have to see, is that reversal coming? Are the green days, gonna start ending into the famous sell in May, go away time period? It's just a saying, but sometimes it does become self-fulfilling, especially if enough people are kind of blowing their horn to that note. Now, moving on to the last one, XBI. This is one that's really kind of shown the risk off, at least in biotech. A huge move down. So we really broke through this support here that we have been really following since the gap up back in January when we really first started this move up. So the cool thing here, and I'll have to mess with the indicators a little bit, I created this multi-factor alert last week, and we can see that here that it had triggered. It was called potential breakdown. And what I had the relative strength 10, the vortex 5, and the Williams percent range 10. So we'll go here, vortex, Williams percent range 10, and then RSI 10. Then we'll have to change this real quick to the 5. And just a note, you can change the properties of the indicators now by just right-clicking rather than having to go into the indicators tab. So just a little note there. This one is interesting because it's the alert literally went off and the conditions were met, and it was cool to see this breakdown occur. And the cool thing was the conditions actually all became true as the price action was breaking down through the support line. So you can see the last condition we were really waiting on was the RSI to go below 45. And so now we're oversold on the percent range and getting there on the RSI. So we have two options. We can really bounce possibly to this area above, which was previous support, now acting as resistance, or we could continue to move down as we did back here. And you can see all of the indicators were pretty oversold here, but the price action continued to move down. Now, the thing too about this thesis is we do have a big gap below. Gaps do like to fill a lot of the time, not always, within a specific time period, but it is interesting to see that this is breaking down before the broad market ETFs. Notice the big volume uptick as well, and you can really see the MACD starting to cross here on the weekly. Not cross yet, but starting to decrease. So as I mentioned before on the SPY, we're looking for that MACD decrease, and it's already happened on XBI. The vortex indicator is actually already crossed as well, something that we've been waiting on for SPY and QQQ. And as we've talked a lot about in these videos, XBI can sometimes be the leader in kind of market direction. Going back all the way to December, notice how on December 24th, when all of this, the market was looking horrible, this was the only one showing a decent candle here and then the rip up. If we go back to SPY, we can see that the candle on December 24th was very ugly, and you never really would have guessed that would have been the bottom. But XBI was showing that doji, while the broad market ETFs like SPY and QQQ were really showing a strong move down with sellers in control. So sometimes I like to look at XBI in relation to SPY and QQQ to see, which way buyers and sellers are really feeling as far as risk on or risk off. So that is all we have for this weekend. Hope everyone has a great holiday weekend, and thank you so much for listening in. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out at hello@trendspider.com or on our social media accounts. As always, we are not licensed brokers or advisors. These are just videos to show how you can use the TrendSpider platform on an everyday, or if you're a longer term swing trader, every weekend type basis. And you can see kind of some of the main features that really make us unique compared to other platforms out there. Thank you so much for listening in. Everyone have a great weekend, and we'll see you next week.